And I believe we're now live. My name's Luke Ford. I'm here with Leanne. We're a couple of converts to Judaism discussing the weekly Torah portion. We're also discussing the weekly Torah portion on the Jewish holiday of Purim. So like many Jewish holidays, it's a Jewish holiday and a Gentile tragedy. Because for the followers of Haman, tens of thousands of them, according to this week's Torah portion, got slaughtered. They planned to slaughter the Jews, and in exchange, they got slaughtered when the Jews got the upper hand. So I got to close my window here, but Leanne, you read the Megillah, so do you have any thoughts on the book of Esther?
Well, to be honest, I mean, I probably didn't take much from it because, like, I was like so busy reading it in Hebrew and then like booing and everything. At every moment, I heard Haman. So, it's definitely an interesting book. It's not a conventional book of the Bible, I think. I mean, you've got two people named after like foreign gods, and a lady who's an attractive queen, and just like saving the day by, I don't know, her presence. Like it wasn't. It's definitely a different kind of theme to like other, as opposed to like other things you hear in the Bible. But
yeah, first of all, there's no mention of God in the book, and
yeah,
also,
exactly.
you know, the heroine, she exercises control not so much by her presence, but by her, you know, the sexual hold that she has over the king. And so just imagine turning your daughter over to the king's harem. So Esther was Mordecai's adopted daughter, and he encouraged her to enter the king's harem. And that entering a harem is not a traditional path for a Jewish girl.
No, of course not. Yeah. Definitely,
Yeah, it's kind of hard to get your mind around, like who would send their daughter to join a Gentile king's harem?
I know. Although, like, I'm thinking back to like I think the Parasha that we spoke about when I last did a video with you or something, and how I think it was the rules about slavery or like having wives or whatnot, and then sending them away to foreign men or something if they aren't pleasing to you or something, I don't know, or your daughters or something like that. I guess it relates kind of to that a little bit, but at the same time, yeah, it's true. Who can really imagine just like sending away your daughter, like a family member, to like a foreign ruler to possibly have his way with her? So definitely something different.
How did you relate to the Old Testament as opposed to the New Testament when you were growing up as a Christian? Because they're two very different books.
Yeah, I mean the Old Testament I kind of had this awe for it, as if it was like something. Like, I mean, because like I was a fan of history, so I mean, most of the biblical books, you can kind of find some sort of historical basis for them. So I kind of related to them and kind of saw them as being more real, but at the same time as being the Old Testament as being something that was like so. How can I describe this? Like so special that it was at the same time it was kind of surreal. I think kind of like stories that you'd think of and you'd be like, wow, this was amazing, this is really 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 interesting, and like a bit like, I guess you could compare it to the way that people look at like Greek myths and legends and whatnot, like that kind of thing. Whereas the New Testament kind of seemed a bit like bare bones, boring stuff, with the exception of like other things. I don't know, like Christians always come up with like the story of Jesus turning wine into turning water into wine, like that kind of thing. But whereas like in the Old Testament, it was like much more like profound miracles.
And a lot more sex and violence in the Old Testament.
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely. Yeah.
But I know a lot of Christians who just don't really care for the Old Testament. They find it too dark. They find it too tribal. They find it too violent. Way too much vengeance. I mean, all the stuff
Yeah.
that I love, they hate.
All those things sound like that because I like sci-fi movies and action movies and stuff. So yeah, I guess it's true. Like you get all the interesting stuff in the Old Testament and then like the boring stuff in the New Testament. So I guess the New Testament's like for boring people, I guess, in a way. So, but yeah, that's true.
And it's very interesting that God is not mentioned in the book of Esther. And yet I was watching an interview on a Christian broadcasting network of Yoram Hazony, who's an Israeli intellectual who wrote a book on Esther. And all the questions by this Christian were about God in the book of Esther. And God is completely absent from the book of Esther as far as any explicit mention. I mean, you really have to read into the text to try to find God in this book. And I think that's makes it a very good book for moderns, because as moderns living in a secular society, it's easy to not have a sense of God. And yet, the book of Esther still teaches us that we're still morally accountable, that we still, even if we can't sense our connection to God, we can at least sense our connection to our fellow, and that, we should act on behalf of our people, even when it's going to be tough, even when our life is at stake, even, when we have to risk everything. These tribal ties should be natural, normal, and healthy, and we may well be required to act on behalf of our tribe.
Yeah, I mean, like, definitely. Yeah, that's true, because I kind of get that impression as well. Because it's true, because I guess maybe that's why like a lot of Jews, like even those who aren't who are secular or like might not go to synagogue like any other time of the year, or might not really believe much in any other teachings in Judaism and whatnot and stuff. But like I guess maybe that's why like a lot of secular Jews take part in Purim, dressing up and the drinking and stuff. I mean, besides that kind of stuff, I guess the fact that because God's not really mentioned and it's not really emphasized, and it's more about human beings and life and whatnot, as opposed to like the spiritual and stuff. I think maybe that's probably why it's a bit easy for them to connect with that kind of holiday as opposed to other ones. So, but like, yeah, it's true, because like the whole idea about like men, like our relationship with other human beings, and like focusing on the role of like other human beings in like the whole story, is, I guess, yeah, it's definitely something more like realistic and relatable for people in this day and age, because it's true, like most people are not really religious. People kind of cringe when people mention God these days, in this modern world. So I guess, yeah, it's interesting about like what people in this day and age think about Purim as opposed to anything else any other story that mentions God in it in the Bible. So yeah, I can definitely agree with that.
Did you grow up with a strong Black identity, in that you felt a kinship with other Blacks and a tribal loyalty to other Blacks, or did you feel more of your loyalty to people who, say, shared your values rather than your race?
I think I think it's probably a bit of both, but at the same time, I think I probably myself personally felt more of an affinity just to people that had similar values. Because I guess if I look back at all the kind of friendships I've had, it's like it's not been based on the fact that I'm Black. It's just been the things in common with values, interests, and whatnot. And I mean, I have had like a sort of at the same time had like a affinity for like other people who are from my similar background, similar ethnic background or racial background, because I guess you have like these shared experiences, and in terms of like the way that your like our parents or grandparents or whatnot, the kind of environment that we're in, like I don't know, like national kind of nationalist kind of things, like from a background with a lot of other Afro-Caribbean people. So I guess there was that, but at the same time, really, that wasn't the main thing. It wasn't the main thing I would focus on when I would like interact with other people. So,
did you have heroes growing up?
Like of my ethnicity
or anyone, like, you know, it might be George Washington, I don't know, or, you know, Comrade Lenin, I have no idea.
That's a good question. To be honest, not really, because like not anyone in particular, I don't think. I mean, because like I guess I had varied interests when I was younger. Like for instance, I used to like playing football, so I had I guess I had football role models. Probably not the best role models to be honest, but I guess in terms of like sporting achievement and whatnot. But also as being like a female that liked football. And like me not being really surrounded by so many girls that liked football as well. I guess I had like role models who were female footballers and whatnot. Or I guess probably some of the teachers I had like in school. I guess like the really nice ones, and the ones who seemed like really passionate about their subject and whatnot, or subjects that I was interested in. But yeah, I don't think I really had any heroes, to be honest. That's like, well, I think most people usually do, but I don't think I like there wasn't really an emphasis on that. I was kind of more individualistic, just focusing on the kind of person I am and what I'd like to be myself, rather than like looking at someone and saying, "Oh, I want to be just like them." But yeah,
Did you?
that was a good question.
Yeah, did you notice group differences? Was there a time in your life when you noticed, you know, hey, now white people are different from black people, Jews are different from, you know, regular white people, you know, East Asians are different from South Asians, and that these different groups have, you know, generalizable statistically, you know, statistically valid, you know, differences, you know, where every individual may not, you know, live up to their group average, but still that there are, you know, generalizable differences between groups. Did you ever notice this? Did you think about it, and and have you ascribed it more to genetics or to environment?
I don't think there's ever really been a single point, but I guess it's just I have noticed, yeah, over the course of my life, there's always different things I'm noticing about different groups and different people and stuff. I went to school with some, like in my primary school, for instance, there was a boy and his brother, and he was like half Chinese, half white English, and there was like I noticed that there was a sort of from like his Chinese side, his mum was Chinese, so and that they were kind of raised with different kinds of values, like really valuing education, for instance, doing things like playing musical instruments and whatnot. And that wasn't something I really saw as something that was valued by, I don't know, other groups. For instance, black people are good, like entertaining and stuff in general. But when it comes to like taking lessons, like piano lessons and stuff, and like violin lessons and classical music and whatnot, that's not really something that was, I guess, not really encouraged, or not really something that was typically done by black people. But as opposed to like Asians, like of like a Chinese background or whatnot, like that would be the type of activity that typically kids like I grew up with in school would kind of engage in if they were background, or I don't know, like Indian and Pakistani pupils being encouraged to do maths and science and stuff like that kind of thing. And I don't know, black people being more spiritual or conservative or something in comparison to, or something like, yeah, I'd noticed differences, definitely noticed differences, and have still been noticing differences. even in this time when it's not really popular, I guess, to notice those differences between different groups.
Yeah, like the simplest explanation that I've ever seen was I read on a blog was the degree of inhibition. So, on average, East Asians tend to be more inhibited than white people, and on average, white people tend to be more inhibited than blacks. So when you have a high degree of inhibition, you're going to have a more stable family life, probably going to have, more educational success, probably going to, on average, earn more money, and you're going to be less likely to commit crimes. On the other hand, the less inhibited you are, the more skilled you're going to be at improvisational pursuits, such as certain forms of music, such as jazz or rap. There are going to be many sports where you're going to have an advantage. You're going to be more outgoing. You're going to probably be more social. You'll probably have more sexual partners. You'll probably commit more crimes if you're less inhibited. So I think just as many white people tend to find East Asians inscrutable and kind of cold and boring, I'm sure that many black people find white people inscrutable, cold and kind of boring because they are far more inhibited than blacks. And I think that's a really simple way of understanding basic racial group differences.
Yeah, it is. It's true. I guess though it's just like not really the popular opinion these days because it's not really so politically correct. People get offended really easily. But yeah, on a basic level, that's kind of that's a really simple understand general differences between different groups. So yeah.
There was a American football star who was also a reverend named Reggie White, and he gave this very controversial sermon in around 1998. And he said, when you look at, he was black. He said, when you look at the black race, black people are very gifted in what we call worship and celebration. A lot of us like to dance. You go to black churches, you see people jumping up and down because they really get into it. White people were blessed with the gift of structure and organization. You guys do a good job of building businesses and things of that nature. You know how to tap into money pretty much better than a lot of other people. Hispanics are gifted in family structure. You can see a Hispanic person, they can put 20 or 30 people in one home. When you look at Asians, they're very gifted in turning like a television into a watch. When you look at American Indians, they're very gifted in spirituality. And when you put all of us together, it forms a complete image of God. God made us different because he was trying to create himself. And I really like that, that different peoples have different gifts.
I think that's a really interesting view. It does make sense. It does definitely sense. It does. Because I look at like the different cultures around and different nations even, and you can kind of apply that. You can see that. Like for instance, like I've heard this, I don't know, about like Germans being like really serious and structured, like you mentioned about how Europeans are. I guess Germans, I guess being like Anglo-Saxon and whatnot, more or less the kind of home ground of where Europeans are kind of from. Well, Western Europeans are from. So Western European society, I guess. So, it's that I think that stereotype probably does fit quite well with Europeans, and it's true when you look at like black people and churches and whatnot, and the entertainment industry and whatnot. It's true. It's a lot about. I think that as a whole is like very descriptive of like how black people are, to be honest. I don't think it can be denied because like if you look at all the black churches in existence today, if you look at the sports, men and women who play sports who are black athletes and whatnot, people that are singers, dancers and whatnot, it's obvious they dominate those fields. So yeah, I think that the view is interesting, especially also coming from a black person as well, because unless it's interesting to hear that it came from pastor. Well, that speech at some point. I think someone shared a video of that on social media, but yeah.
Yeah, now, and the ruling ideology of our age says we can't talk about group differences because that leads to the Holocaust.
Yeah.
You know, and the Holocaust is used as an example for why, you know, we can't discuss important things like, you know, group differences. And I think group differences are as obvious as, you know, the nose on my face.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, you're not allowed to say that, you know, publicly. I got into a lot of trouble with a friend of mine, who was one Jew talking to another about how to approach a bargaining position, and I said, "Oh, I love how you guys are using your Judaism," and you know, my left-wing Jewish friend was very offended that I would say that Jews are good at negotiating. But you know, in a traditional Orthodox synagogue where there are a lot of business people, you know, they take it for granted. Yeah, you know, Jews are good at negotiating. Jews are verbally gifted. You know, that's why Jews make good lawyers and good talk show hosts and good comics. And also, you know, why blacks make good comics, because they are, you know, verbally gifted, and they're gifted with improvisational skills that, you know, many whites and East Asians don't have.
Yeah, it's true. It's quite funny, actually. The other day I got into a conversation with someone at synagogue, and he was like Jewish. I think we got into this conversation because to the synagogue, and there was like a breakfast for like members and new members, and I came and I didn't really know what to do, and there was like lots of food around, like bagels, lox, everything, and the guy was like, "Hey, I noticed you're not eating." I was like, "Yeah." He was like, "Come on, eat. This is what we Jews do." And then he started getting into a conversation with me about like Parasha,
yeah,
livelihood, and he was like, "Yeah, because this is really important to Jews, you know, like us born, like being Jews, being born into this, like we know this. This is how we've been raised, like to value livelihood and sustenance and whatnot." And like that's something that we know, whereas people coming into the fold, this is something that you have to learn. So yes, he was talking about success in negotiation and that kind of thing. So yeah, I do think that's something that's like an attribute that the Jewish people are known for, I think, even if people don't want to admit that today.
Yeah, I think that's one of the primary differences between non-Jews and Jews, and this is empirically shown by studies, is that Jews place a lot more emphasis on success. You know, being a fireman, or, you know, a public school teacher, you know, is not, or, you know, or going into the military is not really a Jewish, you know, a Jewish way to make a living.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
Now, you're expected to be a university professor, or a doctor, or a dentist, or a lawyer, or an accountant. You know, you're expected to be a professional or a successful business person, and if you aren't one of those, you're a loser.
Yeah, well, yeah, basically, yeah.
And one of the downsides of this approach is that there's a lot of cutting of corners in Jewish life. I remember Dennis Prager used to teach at Brooklyn College, and he said it was known among the faculty there that Jewish students were more likely than non-Jewish students to cheat. And so through much of the world, the word Jew is synonymous with dishonest in business. So that's the downside of this, you know, huge emphasis on success. While as a white person, as a Seventh-day Adventist, I grew up with the teaching from my parents, just do your best. But that's not so much an Asian or a Jewish attitude. You know, you're expected to achieve. Like, just doing your best doesn't cut it.
Yeah. That's interesting. I hadn't really thought about the I mean, because I obviously knew there were negative views, but I didn't really see it in that way. Negative views about Jews, and see it like being connected to that. But I guess, yeah, like the more successful a group is, or like the more a group seems to value success, and the more that others start to envy that and kind of try to explain it away by saying that they've done bad things in order to get to that situation or whatnot, like cheating or lying or stealing or whatnot. So,
and that's and that's one of the advantages of having a dual morality system. Like for Anglos, there's one morality. For Protestant Christians, there's one morality for all humanity, and there's no difference how you treat a member of your in-group versus how you would treat an outsider. But for Jews and other Middle Eastern peoples, and virtually everyone in the world who's not of Northern European origins, there's a dual morality system. There's one morality for how you treat your in-group, and then there's a much more relaxed morality for how you treat your out-group. And so that moral flexibility can give Jews an advantage in business because they're not expected to treat the non-Jew with the same rigor that the Torah requires them to treat the Jew. For example, the Torah says you can't lend to a Jew at interest, but you can certainly lend to a goy at interest. So there's a lot more flexibility. And also when you're living in a diaspora, you can have a lot more flexibility in that this may not be your home. You may have been in England for 3 generations, but your home is the Jewish state of Israel. And so you don't have to treat it with the same proprietary interest that an owner treats his property. Like an owner would treat his property, generally speaking, much more carefully than a visitor, or someone who's being lent a car, or you can stay in my apartment for the weekend. I notice that when I lend property to someone, they rarely take the same care of it as I would as the owner.
Oh, hang on. I lost you for a split second.
Yeah, no problem. I was just saying that the owner of a property would take much more care of it than someone who's just using it. And for some Jews in the diaspora is just something they're using to make a living. They will regard their true home as the land of Israel. And so this will allow, Jews in the diaspora, or Chinese in the diaspora, or other Asians in the diaspora to engage in all sorts of ways of making a living that an owner, like that an Anglo, that someone who regards the land as his homeland could never engage in, such as drug trafficking, or anything shady, or pornography, or rap music that's really toxic. There's so much of the entertainment industry puts forth a toxic product, that I doubt that they would put forward if they regarded the land of their residence as their true homeland.
That's true. Like that idea, that makes a lot of sense, because I'm thinking about the kind of antagonistic attitude that some have towards, because I've even heard this like on social media, because like sometimes I follow a lot of them, the United States, and some people complain about like the kind of duplicitous attitude that American Jews have towards the state of Israel, like kind of valuing it equally with the United States, even if they're like born in the United States and whatnot, but like still seeing Israel as being the homeland, the true place that they belong and whatnot. And like the whole AIPAC lobby and stuff, and a lot of people get angry with that. You can see that I guess the kind of Anglo-European or white European kind of attitude was just to have the kind of single standard the same standard that you treat everyone, like every single person in the same way, as opposed to having the dual morality kind of thing.
Definitely. Were you raised with a dual morality? Did you notice that, say, among other people of Caribbean origins or Black origins, that there was one way you would treat your fellow Blacks and a more relaxed standard for how you treat outsiders?
I guess to like some degree, but like not very much, because like, for instance, like I guess probably something that with my grandparents' generation, especially because like they came to this country in about, well, my granddad came in the 40s, but like the 50s generally. And when they came here, the whole point of them coming here in the first place was like they kind of saw this country as being like the motherland. So even though Caribbeans and whatnot seem to have a kind of distinct culture, it wasn't really, it's never really been that different was never really been perceived as being that different to like English culture or British culture. So the dual morality doesn't really kind of exist as much. I mean, we acknowledge that like there are things about the Caribbean and experiences of being brought up in like Caribbean heritage, kind of like that kind of unique to people from the Caribbean, but at the same time, it's seen as more of a compliment to British culture and identity, as opposed to being something that's kind of separate. If you get what I mean. So, like, I guess probably the unique thing about the Caribbean, or just like many colonies, I guess, to the British Empire and whatnot, is that a lot of us still kind of see ourselves as being British. I mean, at least I do, or at least my family do. But yeah, the Jamaican identity is there. It's definitely there. So, but I think I probably felt this to varying degrees. Probably like a bit different when I was younger, and a bit different now. So, but yeah, it's I don't know. It's definitely a lot more complex when it comes to. It's not as clear cut. I think it probably depends on different people as well that you meet. Different people have different views, I guess. But yeah, not much. Yeah.
So this week's Torah portion is Kititza, Exodus chapter 30, verse 11 to chapter 34, verse 35. It's the longest Torah portion, Parasha, in the book of Shemot, the book of Exodus. And there's the story of the golden calf. Is probably the main, most famous story in this week's Parsha. And the Jews are waiting for Moses to return, and they get anxious when he doesn't return, and they act out. And they build this golden calf, and they start dancing around it. And perhaps, it's not just dancing, it's an orgy. And it's pretty shocking to Moses when he finds it. So I was discussing in my show earlier today that about attachment theory, and it seems like these Jews waiting for Moses to return, they have insecure attachment. So someone with insecure attachment, they get very anxious about their relationships. And so when someone doesn't return at the time they expect, they get increasingly anxious. And finally, they start acting out. They'll send a bunch of crazy texts, or maybe they'll get their beloved's clothing and throw it out the window, or they'll self-destruct, or they'll act out in some manner. And so that's seems to be what's happening, that the Jews aren't particularly mature and aren't able to handle the anxiety of Moses being away. It reminds me of some scenes in the 2010 movie The Social Network about the founding of Facebook, and one of the founders has this Asian girlfriend who like burns all his clothes and like sends in like 100 texts when he's on the plane, because she can't handle the anxiety of their relationship. And it's like the Jews can't handle the anxiety of their relationship with Moses and God, and so they act out in this destructive manner.
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting viewpoint. I kind of took the viewpoint that it seemed, I mean, kind of similar to that. I guess I saw it as like being as not necessarily anxiety, but more like boredom. I saw it as something like, oh, okay, Moses hasn't come back. He doesn't look like he's coming back. Okay, what should we do? I don't know. Let me do something mischievous, or something interesting, or something to pass the time, or to fill the void. Because obviously, if Moses isn't coming back, then there's probably not going to be there's not going to be God coming down or anything, or Moses is the one who usually deals with this kind of stuff. So I don't know. Let's start worshiping a golden calf or something. I kind of saw it as just that kind of thing, really. Yeah, you could.
Yeah, like people have to worship something, and so if they don't have Moses to direct them to God, then they're going to build a substitute God. And I think that's pretty
Yeah.
much a universal human reaction, is that most of us have a need to worship something.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So like that's how I saw that. I was thinking about the reaction to that, how God reacted, because like in the Parasha, how it says, I think it says that he kind of got really angry and he was thinking of the apparently thinking of evil things to do to the Israelites, like basically just to kill them. And I saw that reaction as kind of being like a bit like a parent or a responsible adult would do when they find out that a child has been doing something they shouldn't be doing, or something that really angered them, and just thinking, oh my goodness me, they need to be punished or something wrong. And that like wanting to come down with like the full force of, I guess, the law on them. And then like Moses being like with Moses's reaction of kind of being like, oh, don't completely destroy them, or like kind of like, I guess, petition on their behalf. And how I kind of saw him as being like the one who's like, oh, well, you don't have to be so harsh on them. Like you don't have to completely destroy them or something. Like you can still be your people, and stuff. So I guess you could compare him to being like, I guess like the mom in the relationship, really.
Yeah,
like
he was
the more
kind of
reasonable
a
adult.
nurturing guy. Like there's a midrash, a rabbinic story, that the reason God chose Moses is that he saw what good care he took of his flock, his flock of sheep, and so he thought, okay, you'll take good care of Israel. And so I believe that King David also used to tend to sheep, and so that's like a recurring job for many of the great leaders of Israel, is that they look after a flock of sheep, and then they look after the Israelites. Another thing that this reminds me of is that this relationship with God is intense, and so God has very intense demands, and he bestows very intense rewards by bringing the children of Israel out of the land of slavery, out of Egypt, and leading them towards their own land. But he also has very intense demands, and he also levies very intense punishments. And it kind of reminds me of Jewish life, is that there's a real intensity to Jewish life as compared to Gentile life, and there's a lot more yelling, and there's a lot more emotional intensity, and there are a lot more demands, and things given. But when things are given, there's also reciprocity expected. So there's a professor, I think his name's James Flynn. He's a professor of psychology. He specializes in IQ tests, and he's from New Zealand, and he took a visiting professorship in the United States in Virginia. And on his cul-de-sac, there was a Jewish family, an Asian family, and a black family, and they were all middle class or above. And after dinner, in the Jewish family, they would yell at each other, and then the kids would settle down and do their homework. After dinner in the Asian family, the kids would just settle down and do their homework. And after dinner in the black family, they would all go out and play basketball. So those are some good differences, but there's also I think it reveals the emotional intensity of Jewish life. I had a mentor at UCLA, a professor at UCLA, who became a very good friend, who was raised of Jewish parents, but he didn't like being Jewish, and he didn't consider himself Jewish. And he hated the emotional intensity of Jewish life. He hated like the parents yelling at the kids and making demands on the kids, and the kids yelling back, and it was just all very distasteful for him. And he went on to specialize in Scandinavian literature, where there's a lot more repression. But I found in my experience in Jewish life, like this tremendous generosity. I remember early on, I was offered a free scholarship to go to this Torah seminar, but it was on the condition that I don't ask any questions publicly. In other words, that I don't disrupt things by being challenging or provocative, which is my personality tendency.
Really?
And so I've experienced a tremendous amount of generosity in Jewish life, but it also comes with tremendous demands.
Mm-hmm.
It's been said Jews invented shunning. Jews are very good at using shunning to punish people who are acting in ways they don't like, that are, say, contrary to Jewish interests, to the well-being of Jews. They will use shunning. They will use punishments to make sure that people act in a way that's in the best interests of the group. So this intense, emotionally intense, with very intense gifts and punishments that I found in Jewish life kind of reminds me of this intense relationship between the Israelites and God in the Torah.
Yeah, yeah, you could I think you could liken that to that. You could, for sure. Yeah.
So you made a bunch of notes on this week's Torah portion, and I'm still exhausted from last week's Purim party. So I'll let you pick out any of your notes that you want to talk about, and I'll listen to what you have to say, and I'll respond.
Okay, cool. So basically, I found a point. Yeah, because even though even though I kind of said before that the response that God had to the golden calf incident was seemingly kind of irrational, and really just a kind of knee-jerk reaction to it, like pure anger and whatnot. At the same time, I can kind of see why it was why he really despised what they did. You think about it, logically thinking about it, you see that what God probably saw was a bunch of these ungrateful kids, after all I've done for them, but basically taking them out of Egypt, doing all these miracles, performing all these miracles, the plagues and whatnot, taking them this far, and then straight after, he gave them the 10 Commandments, telling them to not do the very thing that they just go ahead and do anyway. It's he probably thought, wow, they seriously did, they ignored everything I said, and they did the very thing I told them not to do. Okay, I'm gonna have to really punish them for this. He was really angry. So I guess logically you say because the Israelites basically disregarded the commandment lo ta'aseh, to not have idols, to worship other idols than God. I guess it was understandable that he had that kind of reaction, that he wanted to kill them. And also the fact that the Israelites, they said that they will do and they will, I think they would do and they will. So they agreed to this anyway. So they agreed to any kind of repercussions they would have for breaking those laws in the first place. So I guess it made sense that there was such an extreme, to put it this way, to say if they can go and go to the extremes of creating an idol and worshipping it, and then they can obviously face a punishment that is equally as extreme as the actions that they just did. So I guess I could understand the rashness action that God had towards them. But then when you see that Moses kind of changes God's mind and says, I'm not going to do, he kind of, I think it said that he, let me see if I can find the verse. That, I think it was something along the lines of that he regretted, but he thought about what he was going to do, and he kind of thought, "Now I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to disregard that. I'm not going to do that, and I'll listen to Moses and say, you're right. I'm not going to completely destroy them and stuff." guess I thought that was strange that he did that, because like if God is, because it said that his thoughts were evil.
The God's
God
thoughts were
isn't
evil. Yeah.
Yeah, it said that like his thoughts were evil, but like if you think about it, because like it kind of contradicts the idea that people have of God, at least the Jewish idea of God, that God is like all good, and merciful, and like he has like different names that like list these attributes and stuff, and evil it's a bit weird, because that's not the idea that people have of God. Like he's supposed to be all good, and first and foremost, and secondly, I think God is said to have created good and evil, so he kind of operates outside of the idea of evil anyway. So I kind of thought that was weird that they mentioned that in the text. So yeah, I didn't think that made much sense. But
what does it mean that God repented of his evil? That's hard to digest.
Yeah, it kind of sounded a bit weird. But then I think when I was reading I googled some things as well and found some stuff from Chabad, and I think I found a text about how there was another time that was similar to what happened in Exodus, in Genesis, when I think after the flood, except instead of when it was the time of the flood, when it was with Noah, and how he destroyed, like he flooded the whole earth, killing everyone else, just leaving Noah in the ark with all the animals and whatnot, and the different species, and like all sorts. And instead of like, I guess kind of then he regretted in a way that he brought about the flood in the first place and killed all these people, and kind of promised not to do that kind of thing again. That time he actually went ahead and did it, whereas in this Parasha, he hadn't actually killed the Israelites, or he hadn't done anything yet, at least at that moment, where he at least said he wasn't going to go through with that. So I guess I kind of compared those two, and I was like, it's kind of similar. I guess it's not the first where you see God kind of backtracking on a decision that he was going to make, where he was going to be really harsh. So I guess that was like an example of him being merciful there. And then I thought another thing that was interesting about the Parsha was how I think it mentions, like, it's kind of like a precursor to what I was just saying, because even though I said that didn't kill the Israelites yet, and he decided not to go through with what he was going to do to them, I think Moses still went ahead and did something about it anyway to kind of rectify the sin. So I think it was like something like, I think it was chapter 33 or 32, where it says to like verse 26 to 20, where it says that Moses kind of like he's like the Israelites, and he was like, who wants to who like is zealous for God or something like that, or who loves God or something, like come over here, and then he was like, get your swords and like run around the camp and kill all the people that were responsible. And I think the Levites did, and they went ahead and did that, and that was like Moses' doing, I guess. But I thought that was like really, really strange, because like there's like, obviously there's a commandment saying that you're not supposed to kill, and you've got a whole like bunch of people who were just there with like all their friends and family and whatnot, and then suddenly Moses is asking them if they want to go and kill their like friends and family for the sin of the golden calf, if they were involved in it. Quickly, the Levites decided to go ahead and like just to agree and say, okay, I'll go and kill these people for you, even if they're my family. Like, I just thought that was a bit strange, like a bit unrealistic, in a way, because like I know that I personally wouldn't be able to just suddenly put my hand up, even if God told me to go and kill someone that was a member of my family. Like, I couldn't do that. But like they really like easily did it, and I couldn't really get my head around it. But I mean, I don't know what you think about that.
Okay, yeah, I got some thoughts here. So, what we're living in now, to quote the title of a book by John Murray Kudahai, is the ordeal of civility. So when the Jews escaped the shtetl and moved into the Western Europe and the United States, they found, the rules of social intercourse and social interaction an ordeal, because the shtetl was much more informal. And if you join traditional Jewish life, you'll find that etiquette is not it's not really stressed. There's not really a Hebrew word for etiquette, as far as I'm aware, as far as what fork you use, and saying please and thank you. Whenever I say excuse me in the line for Kiddush, I'm admitting that I'm a convert to Judaism. I get skittish about pushing my way forward for the food, and often I find with Jews from the Middle East, they'll pick up food from the Kiddush and then put it down again. So
Yes.
some other poor schmuck is going to pick up food that they've been handling. So there's really big gulf between particularly Middle Eastern Jews and Jews recently, say, from the Eastern Europe and Soviet Union, in their table manners compared to more westernized and assimilated Jews, let alone Western non-Jews. And it's part of the ordeal of civility is that there's kind of a contract in the United States that we all get along and act respectfully towards other religions. But the price of doing that is we kind of have to give up the exclusive claims of our religion. And so, the American religion becomes civility rather than authenticity to your particular faith. And so what we're reading about in this Parsha is, people who take religion seriously. They're not suffering the ordeal of civility. If God tells them to go kill their relatives, their family, their friends, they go kill them, because that's what God says. These are people who take their religion seriously. Now, I'm not at all sure that I'd like to be living in the time of this Parsha, with God going around commanding the Levites to slaughter people and to drink water that's been filled with gold dust, and I just not sure I'd really be into that. So in many ways, there's an advantage in having a much more distant relationship with God, because these people have a really intimate, close relationship with God, but I don't think I'd like it. I mean, this is not how I would like to live. This feels very, unsafe. It feels chaotic. It feels I'm not really sure I'd be into it. So I guess I kind of prefer the more distant relationship to God that we have today, rather than the more intimate relationship that they had there. There's a good, interesting book called God, a Biography by Jack Miles, who notes that as the Hebrew Bible goes along, God becomes increasingly distant. So God was very wrapped up in the lives of Adam and Eve. He even sewed them garments. And then God was a friend of Moses and intervened repeatedly to protect the Israelites and to punish the Israelites. But then as you go through the Tanakh, God becomes increasingly distant. So when you get to a book like Esther, which is in the Ketuvim, the writings, the final portion of the Tanakh, he's not even mentioned at all.
Yeah,
and so
it's like almost distant.
Yeah, so I see certain advantages to a more distant relationship with God. Just if you know any people who are burning for God, they can not necessarily be fun to have in your daily life. They may be inspiring You may want to go to a lecture by them, but you may not want them in your daily life, because people on fire for God can be a pain in the butt. And my father used to say this about how to understand what he called the Pentateuch, because my father's a Christian theologian, and he said these are instructions to an army on the march. So it's a bunch of ex-slaves who need to be disciplined and turned into an army so that they can conquer the promised land. And so that's why there's so much rigor, so much discipline, and so much retribution and killing and slaughter and divine anger, because he needs to shape up this army on the march. And I think that's a valid point.
That's interesting. I also had there was something. That's it. I was thinking of something. I guess it kind of related to that in a way. But like, do you know how like the whole group, the theme of like group differences and whatnot? And when I was actually looking more into that bit of the text where it says the Levites did this and stuff, and how I was kind of struggling to like see how they would so easily go ahead and kill their own brothers and whatnot. Then I like, because I thought of something, and then I realized that it's I think there was a specific reason why the Levites were the ones that were said to have done this, because I think in the book of Genesis somewhere, I think it was like Genesis chapter 9 verse 11 to 15 or something like that, and where it said that I think it was something talking about the tribe of the brothers Simeon and Levi, and how they were known for being really angry and vengeful, and a lot of wrath that they would let unleash on deserving peoples. And like that's not the first time it's not the first time that their tribal namesake did something like that. So I guess maybe that group, the Levites, kind of were expressing like their kind of group behaviors or characteristics or traits. I guess it got passed down to them, really. So I guess that would explain why they in particular could so easily go and be vengeful to their fellow like brothers because of what they did for the sin of the golden calf. So I guess that was interesting, finding that.
I'm sure there were group differences between the tribes and the Levites and the Kohanim and of course the only tribe that survived eventually was the tribe of Judah, from which we get the word Jew.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so I'll throw it back to you if you have any more thoughts on this week's portion.
Okay. So like I was there was a curious thing that I saw in the Parasha about I think it was near the beginning, about like not being able to like count the amount of Jews were in existence, or having a special way of doing so. That was the only way that was allowed. I think it was like for every Jew that there was, you'd offer shekel in order to, I think, count them or something like that. And that I kind of thought that related to like the whole idea of like obviously like what it did. I think it did mention a census in that Parsha, but like I was kind of relating it to real life because I was kind of confused. If in that text it says that aren't allowed to count how many they are, then does that mean that Jews are not allowed to take part in like censuses and stuff?
Not in the the Jews are allowed to take part in a census in a non-Jewish country, and I don't know what the halakha would be for a census in the Jewish state of Israel, but Jews are certainly in the United Kingdom or Israel are certainly allowed to take part in the census.
Okay, cool, got it. Because I was trying to find like information on that, but like I was getting views saying that it's actually debated and some people believe it's not and stuff.
Yeah, because if Jews refused to take part in a census in a Gentile country, they would be putting their well-being and the well-being of the whole community at risk. So
That's true. I guess the dual morality thing there as well. Yeah. That's true.
it's interesting. It says in the Parasha that Moses was with God for 40 days and he didn't eat or drink. Didn't eat or drink for 40 days. It's kind of hard to imagine anyone surviving that.
Yeah. I like barely there was the fast of Esther the other day, and I barely survived one like short day. Well, really short day, even shorter than 24 hours. Like I think it was like 12 or 14 hours or something like that.
Yeah.
And I barely survived that. So imagine a 40-day fast. That's crazy. That is.
And another thing that catches my eye is Exodus chapter 4, verse 11. And God says, I will drive out before you the Amorites, Canaanites, Hittites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. Be careful not to make a treaty with those who live in the land where you're going, or there will be a snare among you. Break down their altars, smash their sacred stones, and cut down their Asherah poles. Do not worship any other god. And what if Hitler's God was telling him, I will deliver the Jews unto your hand. Be careful not to make a treaty with them, for they will be a snare to you. Break down their synagogues, smash their sacred artifacts, burn their Torah scrolls, and drive them out, or destroy them utterly. Destroy their altars. So this is what the Torah says the Jews are to do in the land of Canaan. We're to dispossess the Canaanites, and we're to destroy their religion and their religious services and their religious buildings. And so too, I guess, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, in that, enemies of the Jews who see the Jews as a negative influence among them, who a snare among you, to use the exact language of this particular English translation, they're going to do that very same thing to us that our Torah commands us to do to the original inhabitants of Canaan. So how do we think about that?
Yeah, that's true. It's interesting. I mean, yeah, it sounds, I don't know, it sounds a bit like repeating the same kind of thing again, but it does sound like it fits with the whole kind of dual morality kind of thing. Like in terms of the fact that like this, like, well, at least relating it to like nowadays, how you would like that kind of thing wouldn't be acceptable to do to, I don't know, your in group or something, but at the same time, you can get away with doing it to the outside, anyone on the outside.
Yeah.
And like with all like the kind of morality that I guess that the Torah is kind of supposed to bring the world, it's kind of a bit of an anomaly that this is like, that's clearly said that they're going to do to a whole load of other people on the outside. So
and I guess like, someone learned in Torah would say, well, this is because these were bad people and they sacrificed children, and God had to create a model for humanity, and so for them to be able to create a holy nation, they had to be rid of anyone who would be a temptation to them. But an Aryan supremacist could argue the same thing. Like,
yeah,
you could argue this exact same thing. Exactly. Be careful not to make a treaty, with the Jews, for when they prostitute themselves to their gods and sacrifice to them, they will invite you and you will eat their sacrifices. And when you choose some of their daughters as wives for your sons, and those daughters prostitute themselves to their gods, they will lead your sons to do the same. So, any passionate enemy of the Jews could say almost these exact same words. Exactly. Don't make any treaty with the Jews. Don't allow your sons and daughters to marry with them, because they will lead you astray from the Aryan ideal, or from the Islamic ideal or from the Christian ideal. And now this is a very hardcore instruction here that from God to the Jews that, we're not to make a treaty with those who live in the land. Well, then, what if, Hitler's God was telling him, don't make a treaty with the Jews. Don't allow, your people to intermarry with them because they will, lead you astray from the Aryan ideal. It's kind of a recipe for total war. This week's Torah portion.
Yep.
And monotheism intrinsically leads to this sort of thinking. If you're a monotheist, you believe there's one true God, and therefore everyone else is not true. And why would you want to allow worship of false gods in your midst? And from a Torah perspective, there is no room for non-Jewish forms of worship in the Jewish state. From a Torah perspective, there's no room for Christianity or Islam to be practiced in a Torah state, because certainly Christianity would be regarded as idolatry in the Holy Land, in the Jewish state. And I don't think they'd want Islam being practiced either, because in a Torah state, there's no room for non-Jewish citizenship. So, it's very exclusivist. And, from a Torah perspective, they want cohesion. They want unity and strength for the Jewish people. And that means not giving civil rights to, freedom of religion and freedom of speech and freedom of movement to other groups. So it's total war.
Definitely. Yeah. It's very true.
That's why some thinkers have a problem with monotheism. Why they argue against it, because they say monotheism inherently leads to total war, and there are some who call communism is basically Judaism in a hurry. in that it seeks to create this brotherhood of man through through total war. And so communism doesn't ascribe any virtue to racial or ethnic or religious ties. It's the brotherhood of the proletariat, and so too this Torah portion doesn't seem to have a lot of respect for freedom of religion. It's like break down their altars, smash their sacred stones, cut down their sacred poles. Do not allow worship of any other god, because your God is a jealous God. And he's the one true and only God. And these people, you got to get rid of them.
Says it in a very overt way as well. It's like no mincing words there or anything. It's just there.
Yeah, and it's kind of the opposite of what Jewish groups in the diaspora, prescribe for Gentile nations. They're supposed to be all multicultural and prize freedom of religion and freedom of speech and equal rights for all minority groups along with the majority. But from a Torah perspective, what it wants for the Jewish state is unity, cohesion, and no other religions, and no citizenship for foreigners, and no practice of anything else that would be disruptive to Jewish strength and cohesion. So it kind of when a Gentile nation allows freedom of religion and allows for such extensive civil rights to minorities that it diminishes their own cohesion and strength. Now I kind of wonder, are they cocks? On the one hand, I like living among them. I appreciate that they let me worship freely, but are they cocks? Are they allowing strangers to take advantage of them and to take advantage of their generosity, to take advantage of their land, and perhaps even dispossess them of their land because they are so nice and multicultural and into multiracialism and freedom of religion and civil rights, and bring in more refugees and give them welfare and give welfare to people who hate you. It seems like they're a bunch of cocks.
Or just I guess sitting ducks, if you want to put it nicely. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's like the fatal weakness of the Northern European, is that because they have this universal morality, they're easy to take advantage of by a cohesive group which can speak their universal morality language, but practice a dual morality.
Yep. It's true.
Is,
I think like
go ahead. Anything else you want to say about this Parsha?
Yeah, kind of, I guess I just thought it was kind of interesting, like the order that follows right after. I think after the incident of the golden calf, and then he starts mentioning. I think it mentions some things about once they like got rid of the people that they killed, that were responsible and stuff. I think it starts mentioning things like, later in the Parsha about Pesach and the Sabbath, I think. What was the Sabbath before? I'm trying to think. And like Shavuot and stuff. I just thought it was really interesting, just the order that it was. I mean, it just seemed kind of spontaneous. Like,
yeah.
I think it was mentioned was, wrote it down somewhere really quickly. I'll find it. The first thing that was mentioned, I think, it was Pesach. Then it was Pidyon Haben. Then it was Shavuot, and then the milk and meat prohibition or something like that. It was just a really kind of random order, but yeah, I just wondered why it was like that, I guess.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a good argument, but there's a good answer, but I don't have it. But I'm just reminded as we study this week's Torah portion, it reminds me of when this rabbi, I believe he must have been a Reform rabbi, here's the headline in the forward, which is a Jewish newspaper: "Speechless rabbi admits losing argument over racism in Israel to white supremacist Richard Spencer." So there was this white nationalist, Richard Spencer, was giving a speech at Texas A&M University, and Rabbi Matt Rosenberg, who is the Hillel rabbi at Texas A&M University for the past 3 years, he got up and he just, this is what he said. The rabbi says, "You come here with a message of radical exclusion. My tradition teaches a message of radical inclusion as embodied by Torah. Would you sit down and study Torah with me and learn love?" And like, how can you study this week's Torah portion and say it's a message of radical inclusion and love? And Richard Spencer was absolutely right. He responded, "You really want radical inclusion into the state of Israel? Jews exist precisely because you did not assimilate to the Gentiles. I respect that about you. I want my people to have the same sense of themselves." And, I agree 100% with Richard Spencer in this instance. I'm thoroughly embarrassed by this rabbi. And this rabbi said that, he found Spencer's answer, bordering on anti-Semitic, which is, I think, just ridiculous. And then the rabbi says, "Oh, I'm just a simple teacher of Torah." And he later took part in a silent demonstration against Spencer's address. And, the rabbi says, "We can't normalize hate speech." Well, has he ever read the Torah? Like, how is, the Torah with its prescription for, genocide of Amalek and the wiping out of the native peoples of Canaan and smashing their forms of worship, how is that, by his measure, not hate speech? I don't get it.
Exactly. I mean, like he could tell that to the people slaughtered by the Levites as well. Like,
right.
That wasn't love. That was like genocide, and I don't know what else. But
I mean, it's just ridiculous to try to reduce Judaism to a message of radical inclusion and love. There is inclusion and love there, but it's inclusion and love between, observant Jews.
Exactly.
And no group can survive by practicing radical inclusion and love,
No, exactly.
indiscriminately without groups. Your group is never going to survive if you do that.
Exactly. It's like a one-way ticket towards like erosion of culture and nation or something. Like it's just not. It's not feasible.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Anything else you want to talk about in this week's Parsha?
Nope, I don't think so.
Okay, great. I'm going to wind it up here.